Welcome to Season 2 of ADAC Answers, an education podcast for all. Produced by the Podcast Business News Network, hosted by Jill Nicolini. ADAC's mission is to empower K-12 school leaders and teachers to meet the individual learning needs of all students through customized, professional development and coaching services. Led and staffed by passionate, committed professionals, ADAC prides itself on delivering precise solutions to its clients' unique education challenges. ADAC stands for Attain, Differentiate, Advance, and Collaborate. 4 words we believe epitomize our work. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have our next guest joining us here today to talk more about, of course, their mission, working with ADAC. And for those of you that may not know, ADAC's mission is really to empower K-12 educators to meet the learning needs of all students nationwide. So they're providing so many networking, educational missions, and of course, helping with teaching, learning, education, coaching, special education fundraising, and so much more. So first and foremost, welcome everyone here to the show. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Great.
There's so many people here today, so I'm just going to start off by asking everyone to simply introduce themselves. Who would like to start?
I can go first, Jill. I'm Ariella Hellman, and I am the Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Public Policy at ADAC.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And also there's the nonprofit as well, correct? That's the other
Yes.
side of ADAC. Could you just share what
Yes.
that is?
Yeah, so absolutely. So ADAC Advocacy is a separate 501c3 organization that focuses on empowering non-public school leaders to access their fair share of federal education program funding. Now, these federal education programs include both ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we have 2 main services that we offer at ADAC Advocacy, and this is federal programs access and coaching, as well as IDEA, Child's Find Navigation and Family Advocacy Services. And we're really thrilled about launching ADAC Advocacy Foundation, which we just launched just a few months ago.
Great. And by the way, what is the website for them as well? Might as well share that too.
Absolutely. So that is the ADACadvocacy.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Next, who would like to introduce themselves? I see Jim Rigg next to my screen. Jim, please say hello.
Certainly. I am Jim Rigg. I'm the Secretary of Education and the Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Archdiocese of Miami, Florida. We serve over 35,000 students in 64 Catholic schools in 3 counties of South Florida.
All right. Thank you so much. Next up.
Sure, I'll jump in. Hi, I'm John Elcesser. I'm Executive Director of the Indiana Non-Public Education Association. It's a state CAPE affiliate. We serve about 400 non-public schools across the state of Indiana, all very different types, different faith traditions. Prior to that, I was Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Diocese of Richmond and the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston.
Beautiful. And last but not least.
I'm Kim Hammers. I am the Executive Director of Embrace. We are a non-for-profit organization who supports students with disabilities and learning differences in our Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas.
Beautiful. Thank you all for being here. Excited to have you. And I know we're going to talk a little about some issues with IDEA to start. Let's talk a little about inclusion, right? And really what's so essential to the mission of private schools. Dr. Rigg and Kim, I think you might want to touch upon this and share exactly what IDEA even is for listeners. Thank you.
Certainly. Why don't I start, and then maybe Kim, you could chime in a little bit. I think this is very close to my heart, this issue of inclusion. And I think in private education, and in particular Catholic and other faith-based school operators, we are called to try to serve all students who wish to come to us in education, including and especially those who have identified special needs. Pope Francis, the leader of our church, talks about serving people on the margins. And those students who have identified special needs and their families are certainly sometimes on the margins. So we in Catholic education believe that we are Catholic, truly Catholic, more Catholic, when we are capable of serving anyone who wishes to come to us, regardless of their background. One of my goals as a superintendent is always to tell a family, listen, there is a Catholic school reasonably nearby to you that can serve your child successfully, even if your child has moderate to severe special needs. Now, in private education, often we're in a work in progress. I think schools are in different places in terms of their ability to serve these types of students. But I think those of us that are in leadership need to constantly push our educators, constantly push our schools to be more open, more accessible, because it helps us to deliver on our educational mission. I know, Kim, you want to hop in a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think you said it so well. In our Catholic schools, we teach our students that they are fearfully and wonderfully made and made in the image of Christ. And that means that we're also individuals and God made us all different. And what is one child's gift may not be another's. And just because a child may look different, speak different, move differently, learn differently, does not mean that they don't have value. And I think our typical learners gain so much in an inclusive environment because they learn they're not just growing academically, but they're growing in compassion and understanding for others and truly serving Christ in a different way. And we want I'm now the executive director since 2022, but for 30 years I did work in our Catholic schools in the archdiocese. 18 of those was as an administrator. And Jim said most the time we can serve a lot of kids, but there are those times that we have to tell family that maybe we don't have everything their child needs. And that's a hard conversation because we don't want families to not be able to send their child to their school that they want so badly their child to attend, or split up their family. Maybe we could only serve some of their kids, but not others. And so we really want to work hard to be inclusive because we know that's what's best for all of our kids.
Perfect. And do you want to get into a little bit, Ariella, about the specifics of IDA and how it applies to private school students?
Absolutely. Yeah. So IDEA is the nation's federal special education law, and it provides for special education and related services to any students with a disability. And typically, we refer to this as FAPE, a free and appropriate public education. Now, the challenge is that FAPE is provided only in a public school setting. So if a parent unilaterally chooses to place their child in a private school, such as a Jewish day school, a Catholic school, a Christian school, any nonprofit school that's totally unaffiliated, they don't have a right to FAPE services. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a right to participate in IDEA. Instead, they do have a right to be equitably included in the district's special education program. And what this means is that those students have a right to be identified through the district's eligibility process, commonly known as the child find process, and that a certain amount, an equitable share of the federal grant funds that come from the federal government to the states and then to the school districts is used to provide services to students in private schools that have disabilities. Now, sometimes this doesn't work exactly as we would like it to work. And what happens is that the process breaks down in a number of different ways. And some of it is as simple as just, it's not an apples to apples comparison. What we're doing is we're taking a private school child and we're putting them, and let's think about that as like a round peg, and we're trying to fit them into the district's eligibility process, which is like a square hole. And that round peg doesn't quite fit into that square hole. And it's really hard for the district to determine whether or not this child in fact has a disability and require special education services. And then that conversation becomes even more challenging when the public school district needs to collaborate with a private school on services for the group of eligible students. So they're not necessarily providing services for every kid who's eligible, but they're making some really tough decisions based on the finances available in order to provide services that are going to be the most impactful to this group of students. And that's a really hard conversation for district administrators who typically think about the needs of an individual student and not as a group. And that collaboration, those relationships have to be built over time. That's sometimes a challenge. And last, just these federal funds. It is that there is a formula for calculating these funds, but sometimes we see that there are errors in the calculation process, or that perhaps there is spending of funds in a way that not intentionally, but that may not be completely in line with the guidance, but is something that has become past practice and has become deeply entrenched over many years. And so those are all the ways that we see the process breaking down for private school children. But in the same breath, I also want to tell you that there are some models of districts and states out there that are running wildly successful programs where kids are getting incredible services and are able to stay within their private school settings, are not being asked to leave and to go to public schools, but instead are fully included within the private or religious school environment and are getting excellent services due to really strong collaborative relationships with those districts. We believe at ADAC Advocacy that this law is fantastic and this law can and should work. And we aim to equip private school leaders with the wherewithal to really access those services on behalf of their children.
Beautiful. All right. I know you're working along with, is it Julie Cantillion, Kate McConnell, and yourself, right? The three of you are here on board with the ADAC advocacy?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here. And again, the advocacy.com, you can find out more information about their federal programs, their coaching, and of course, all the other services that they provide, including, as we mentioned, IDEA, child find navigation and advocacy here. Thank you for that. Yeah, we touched upon what you all do in the beginning of the show today for the advocacy, of course, area. And just to point out the regular website for ADAC, it's the ADAC, right? The ADAC.com. I don't think we established that off the top, so just want to make sure. So also for today, I want to just move on over to Dr. Jim Rigg 1 second. I know as a Catholic school superintendent, can I ask your experience with IDA and maybe talk a little bit about how important it is for private schools to really be inclusive and how ADAC advocacy can really help? I know it's a long question, but we could also chime in. Thank
Yes,
you.
Absolutely. I'll start, and others may want to chime in here. This is my 14th year as a Catholic superintendent, and I've always been in Catholic education as a teacher and as a principal and in other administrative positions. And this is actually the third place I've been a superintendent. I started in Ohio and then was in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And unfortunately, in my experience, IDEA is mostly dysfunctional in regards to private schools, at least in the places where I have served. And comparing notes with other superintendents around the country, many of them have similar experiences. I do think part of the fault of this dysfunction is our own. I think private school leaders, educators, and I would include myself in this, we often do not have a deep understanding of IDEA. And also in our information overload world where we're constantly bombarded by issues and other priorities, we don't always give IDEA the attention that it really deserves. But as I said earlier, inclusion, serving kids with special needs, that absolutely needs to be a focus of what we do in private education and is a key part of our mission and in the Catholic context, our ministry. So I think part of the issue is internal. We need to do a better job of educating ourselves and prioritizing IDEA and inclusion in general. And then there certainly have been issues both at the state level as well as with the individual public school districts or LEAs. And I'll offer a few examples of some things happening here in Florida. For example, with Child Find, we discover that oftentimes public school districts are taking a long time to respond to parents when they request an evaluation, far longer than the 30 days, which is required by state law. Oftentimes, families or schools are required to complete exhaustive packets of information or participate in RTI procedures or even go through private screenings before they're accepted into evaluation, all of which I believe is contrary to the federal guidance. Timely, meaningful consultations are often not timely, meaningful, or consultations. The local public school districts often try to schedule them at a time which may not work for the local private school. One particular egregious example here that took place a couple years ago is we had a local school district that tried to schedule one of these TMC, timely, meaningful consultation meetings on a Jewish holiday. And our Orthodox Jewish colleagues there was no way they were going to make it. And you say, listen, can you work with us? Can we make this a time of mutual convenience? We had another instance where a school district tried to schedule one of these meetings during the octave of Easter, which is a time of craziness and also our own spring break in the Catholic schools. I know a lot of these meetings are often done virtually, where the chat feature will be turned off, where there's no opportunity to offer questions or commentary. And as a result, as Ariella said, we do have concerns about whether the proportionate share is accurate or even being communicated clearly to our private school leaders. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, I think, of issues that are happening in IDEA. Now, what can ADAC do to help, or what have they done to help? I had the privilege of working with ADAC when I was in Chicago, and then partly was responsible for bringing them down here to Florida. I think they can help on both of the fronts, the internal front in educating our people, our educators, our families about IDEA and special education equitable services, and also advocacy. And ADAC has been incredibly helpful in reaching out to state officials, local public school districts, advocating for our students, advocating for our schools. So they've really been a champion of IDEA and inclusion in general, and have just been terrific partners, I think, for us in the Archdiocese of Miami.
Great.
You know,
Thank
Jill,
you
if
for
I
that.
can
Go
I?
ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kim. I'm sorry.
Sure. So, just to jump in on that, in our archdiocese, we have 42 Catholic schools, and that covers 12 different counties across the state of Kansas and multiple school districts. Just in Johnson County, which is a huge suburban area from Kansas City, we have 8 different school districts, and what we find is that school district to school district, they interpret IDEA differently. We also have multiple schools that sit on our state line between Kansas and Missouri. So we do have Missouri students that come to our Catholic schools in Kansas and Missouri, interpret it very differently. And based on that interpretation depends on what services our kids can receive, and whether or not some of our districts will even screen children and to see if they would qualify. And so I think that has been a frustration for our schools. And just working with ADEC, they have the resources, they have the knowledge, and they have the ability to work with the state and then the districts. And then, as Jim was saying, to train our own administrators and our special education teachers to advocate for their own schools, to say, hey, this is what we really need. This is what we're asking for. This is what our students deserve. And so we're real excited to see. We're just in that starting process. We've been started in January with them, but we've been very impressed with what they're doing, and we know that this is going to benefit the kids in our Catholic schools in the diocese, but also other private schools, other parochial schools, and then really just the state of Kansas. And so we're super excited to see where this is going, and we've been very impressed with what we're getting through them thus far.
Great. Anybody else want to piggyback on this, or shall we move along?
I'll jump in.
Sure.
Just to echo a little bit of what Jim and Kim both said. If you ask me the question, how has my experience been with IDEA, both as a superintendent and in my current role, my answer would be very simple, and basically what Kim just said. It depends.
Okay.
It depends on the LEA and the leadership in that particular school corporation, and do they have a philosophy where they believe that all kids are their responsibility? And so they don't take a minimalistic approach to meeting the law. They look at what's in best interest of kids and provide services at that level rather than whatever minimally they had to do to meet those requirements. The complexity of IDEA is immense. And that's why people like Ariella are so important. And not only has ADAC helped to educate our school leaders, but they've helped educate our State Department of Education. We were able to combine trainings with ADAC and with our DOE, and our State Department kind of owned ADAC as their consultants too, even though they weren't paying for them. They were saying, these are our partners. And that was a huge accomplishment from our perspective, where they would defer to people who are really experts, because what you find is that there's a lot of turnover in the public sector.
Yeah.
And because the law is so complex, it's hard enough for them to understand the responsibility with public schools, let alone what the responsibilities are in serving parentally placed private school students. And that's where the support and professional development and consultation that ADAC provides for our school leaders and for our State Department of Education has been immensely helpful.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also for today, I know we still want to talk. We have, oh my goodness, we only have 8 minutes left. It happens like this. It always goes so fast. We want to talk more about Embrace, Kim. I know that as a special education advocate and executive director, we can talk a little more about your experience with IDA and, of course, how the ADAC advocacy can help. And also, we want to talk about maybe the generous state special education laws. Are they leading to robust special education services for private schools and students? John, Ariella, whoever would like to chime in would be awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want everyone to get a
Well,
turn.
we want to go ahead and start with the generous programs. Is that where you want to go, Jill?
Sounds good to
Okay.
me. Sure, sure.
And Ariel and I, that's good that you pointed to us because we've had many conversations over the last couple of years about Indiana, who we believe has a generous special education law. In addition to federal dollars, there are also state dollars available to serve students. And in Indiana, their special education law, which is referred to as Article 7, requires that every student that is identified must be served. And if you ask me, is that a benefit? I would say, again, it's a mixed bag because it does create an awareness on the part of the LEA that students in non-public schools and private schools have to be served. And that's good. The challenge is we're still dealing with the same pool of funds, and it has a tendency to spread those dollars pretty thinly. And a lot of times that means school corporations take a minimalistic approach in terms of the kind of services they provide. A teacher of record calling twice a year to check in on a student rather than providing some type of in-classroom support. And so we've had many conversations about that, and it definitely is a mixed bag from my lens anyhow. Ariel, I don't know if you have another
Yeah,
perspective.
I'll just share an example from Massachusetts, which was really the very first state that we worked on, even before ADAC was established as a company. And what we found in Massachusetts was that students have the same right to special education services in private school as their public school peers. And you read the law and you say, oh, this is wonderful, right? Our kids should get the best services ever. And then what we found in practice was that it led to so much confusion between the state law obligations and the federal law obligations that actually in Massachusetts, our kids were only offered a right. They were offered an opportunity to come to the public school to get service. And barely any families could actually take advantage of that because of logistical challenges, etc. And it actually meant that in Massachusetts, we had less services because we had this generous state law. So it really is a mixed bag in some states where there's a lot of thoughtfulness about both the state law obligations and the federal law obligations. We can make it work. And that's really where we come in, as John said, and really collaborate with the State Department of Education and the LEAs to try to make sense of this, to sift through all the information and make it work for kids. But often it doesn't necessarily lead to more, which is really unfortunate when you think about the children that really need to benefit from this support.
All right. I know there's a lot of us here. Just want to make sure everyone is chiming in. And did anyone else want to add to the conversation? I know we have John, Kim, Jim, Ariella. There's so many of us today. I feel like we're like in the family square here. All right.
I would love, Kim, maybe if you could just say a couple words about Embrace. I think it's a really neat
Perfect.
effort that you have going there in Kansas.
Yeah, so Embrace started around 2015 officially, and just a group of passionate parents that has students with disabilities and wanted them to be in the Catholic schools. They didn't want to have to separate them from their other siblings, and they knew that at the time most of our Catholic schools didn't have everything their child needed. And really, in 2018, it really got started. Since then, we have given out over $2 million in grants to our Catholic schools to hire resource personnel. Along with, we also award scholarships to our teachers to receive their master's in special education. We feel like that really giving our teachers the knowledge to be able to equip them to have what they need to be able to educate all students is truly important. And just in this last 2 years, we've given a million, almost $1 million we've given to our Catholic schools. But there's a bigger need. The ask was this year was over $1 million just this year from our Catholic schools, and at this time we still don't have all those resources. So we are out working hard, spreading the word to everyone we can and just say this is really important. Inclusion is important. Our schools want to be inclusive to everyone. They never want to have to say, tell a family no, that they cannot serve their child. And so we're working really hard with that. We're so excited to partner with ADAC because we feel like our schools are going to become even more inclusive than they are right now.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And we still have just 3 minutes left in the show. How did you all want to sum up today's conversation? And of course, add a little bit more to what we're talking about today, which is again, overall issues with IDEA.
I would just say I think it's been a terrific conversation, and I'm grateful for the interest. And just to pick up on what Kim was saying, there may not be a lot of knowledge always about IDEA in the field, but there's a lot of passion. And I found both educators and parents really get passionate about this issue. And if we can educate them and empower them, we will see change. And ADAC has been very helpful at doing that here.
Right. And how can we reach out? Would you guys all mind sharing, of course, the websites and how we can contact?
Sure. So our website is www.miamiarch.org.
Great. John, do you want to share next?
Sure. IMPEA is just www.impea.org.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have Arielle and Kim.
Thanks. So our website for ADAC advocacy is theadacadvocacy.com.
And Embraces is embraceks.org.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time here today, talking more about the importance of this and all the work that you're doing in collaboration to make it all happen it's for the students out there, right? And thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right.
1 in 5 children in the United States have learning differences, making it more challenging than ever to be a teacher or school leader. At ADAC, we empower K-12 educators to meet the learning needs of all students through customized professional development and coaching services. Learn more at www.theadac.com. That's THEADAC.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode of ADAC Answers. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about ADAC, please visit our website, www.theadac.com. That's theadac.com. You can also find us on Facebook and LinkedIn.